Before we dive into today's episode, we have some exciting news to share. Our spring cohort of the Next Economy MBA begins on March 28th, 2023, and we want you to join us. We designed the Next Economy MBA for entrepreneurs and change makers who are helping to create a world that works for all life. During this 9-month program, you'll learn practical skills on how to transform your organization into one that is just, equitable, and regenerative. Plus, you'll join an alumni community of over 400 impact leaders who are transforming organizations around the world. Interested in learning more? Visit lifteconomy.com/MBA to view our course curriculum and sign up for a free intro session with our facilitators. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show. Welcome to the MBA Series. This is a special multi-part series within Next Economy Now. We are going to review the arc of the learning journey that is presented in the Next Economy MBA online course. We are open sourcing the content from our course and hope to share it in this shorter, bite-sized format. We are launching this series because we were asked to do it by listeners like you. We're also doing it because we are writing a book entitled The Next Economy MBA, Redesigning Business for the Benefit of All Life, which will be published on May 23rd, 2023 by Barrett Kohler Publishers. This is a sizable series. There will eventually be 18 podcast episodes of course content and 9 interviews with MBA alumni. We will be rotating every other week with our normal Next Economy Now interview format. We hope you enjoy it. Please reach out to us via our website, lifteconomy.com, with any comments, feedback, or requests. And now, on with the show.
Hello, and welcome to Next Economy Now. And this is our MBA series. Today is Next Economy MBA session number 10, Strategy 1, Positioning. And I am Shawn, a partner at Lift Economy, and I am here with...
I'm Ryan Honeyman, also a partner at Lift Economy.
All right. Great to be here with you, Ryan, today. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss with you. And just a little framing. So we're coming out of setting our vision for our company, our culture. So those being these kind of guideposts for the business, but then how do we actually get into business, right? So we know what we're going to try to do, and we know how we're going to do it with our team. So now we're getting into strategy, and the strategy is how we develop a plan for running this enterprise and how we bring our services to market. I have to understand the market, the industry, and how do we position our offering in that market. But we don't just start with the positioning, right? We're going to start with the research first, Ryan. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks, Shawn. Yeah, I'm also excited about this topic because one thing that we like to speak about in our MBA course is this idea of needs versus known needs. And so when you're researching a topic or a potential product or service and whether you can offer it, we see many sort of ethically oriented people who are passionate about the next economy see so many needs in the world. There's a lot of need. And your perspective on, what your own community might benefit from is unfortunately maybe different than what the community actually wants from you or from your product or service. So for example, you might firmly believe that your community would benefit from having, healthy, nutritious, organic, regeneratively grown food. And this is a clear need, but whether it's a known need in your community might be different. So other people in your community might say, hey, we need the stoplights to work. I don't want, the first need for me isn't necessarily regeneratively grown food. And, so I think the one piece that we're trying to get across is you really want to try to distinguish in your research, what do people actually say they need? And then what is maybe an actual need? I don't know, Shawn, you want to add anything else to that?
Well, I'm just, you said the regeneratively grown food, it might be a need, but not a known need. Why is it a need?
Right. Yeah, we all have basic human needs, right? There's some fundamental needs that we have for access to healthy food, clean water, clean air, shelter, healthcare. And so we know that it's a need because everyone has these basic fundamental human needs. And
I know I need
yeah,
food, right? But
yeah,
you said something special about the food. And why
right.
is that a need as opposed to what I think is just, hey, I just give me some food. I don't need the fancy
Right.
names with it.
Yeah. Because if you're thinking at the systems level as like a next economy entrepreneur or sort of aspiring entrepreneur, you're really thinking at like these different layers. So if you're just getting, really crappy food that's not organic or regeneratively grown, sure, it might give you this sort of caloric intake that you might need in that moment, but you're not necessarily benefiting, the soil health, or you're sort of adding more pesticides potentially by having those products. So I think as next economy entrepreneurs, we really want to think of like what are the multiple layers that we can create impact from. And, I should say at this point, there's obviously some privilege and positionality to even have access to organic and regeneratively grown food. And so, one thing is that this might not be available to everyone. And so being mindful of that. And I think that there's also this constant trade-off that we face as next economy entrepreneurs of like, how do we balance what we know to potentially be good, which might be buying this maybe more expensive regeneratively owned product or grown product, but then maybe you don't have the money to like do everything perfect in your life. So there's a level of like self-care and grace that you have to offer yourself. And we do talk in other parts of this course about how to actually lower the cost. If actually there were things, if there weren't corporate subsidies for, pesticide companies, et cetera, like food would be much cheaper and sort of, or at least the nutritious and healthy organic food. But I think broadly, the point we're trying to get across is try to determine in your research between needs and known needs.
Right. And then that's just a good example of, obviously I know I need food, but you having a future vision for a food system that works for all life
Yeah.
and enhances health and wellness of not just the person who's eating it, but the whole life cycle of it. You can see that if it's regenerative, local, organic, seasonal, I'm getting a much healthier product without pesticides. So I might not know that's a known need. You know it's a known need. But if you're trying to market that to me, you can't tell me about what I don't know about, right? Talk about that. So then what?
Yeah. So what we encourage folks to do in that case is education-based selling. So it's another sort of principle that we talk about in our course. And that sort of happens when your audience might not know what you're doing, but instead of just, pitching that they should buy it, how can you actually, bring folks along with you and educate them as you're attempting to sell a product or service? So it's like growing this sort of capacity of your prospects or potential customers or, community members in addition to selling. So one example that I should maybe shout out is Seedles, which is the seed balls. So Seedles is a company based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they originally started to provide these seed balls, which is basically, a technology popularized by a gentleman in Japan around like, take compost and clay and seeds and roll them into balls and you put them around the garden, and then birds can't get to the seeds because they're inside the compost and clay. And then, when the rains come, it actually like then disperses the balls and the plants grow. And it's a really beautiful way to create cover crops. But this wasn't working for Seedle. So they tried building these and people were just not, their positioning and sort of market research, people didn't know it was a need. It was not a known need.
Not a known need, right?
Exactly. And so one day a prospective customer called them and asked if they could send like 100 seed balls as an eco-friendly party favor for the kid's birthday and then to add color to the balls. And so the folks at Seedle said, interesting. So they started using plant-based dyes. And then they actually realized that this could be a whole shift in their business model to a known need, which is like parents who are struggling to find, gift eco-friendly party favors, which
right.
Me and Shawn are both parents, which is definitely.
I know. And how many kids' birthday parties you've been to that's full of plastic and trash and you throw away this huge garbage bags and yay, the kids had fun for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so so Seedle shifted their business model to this known need, and then it changed their business model to like wildflower and habitat restoration for bees. So now they're so popular and as an eco-friendly party favor and Easter gift that they started to the demand started to outstrip their own supply. So it's a good problem to have. And the key was finding that positioning. So Shawn, could you talk about this like build, measure, learn cycle and maybe how that fits into this?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. We're talking about this in the context of strategy and really see this as the most strategic thing you can work on for your company. Also tie in what we see as common pitfalls. A classic one is a founder owner, even the Seedles, for example, if they didn't change, right? We're just doing the seed balls, the way we thought of it, and we're not going to adapt. And then guess what? There's no market there, right? So this build, measure, learn loop is so important. So the original build was, hey, it's just a clay seed ball and, you throw it in the field and the thing grows. But what they measured was no sales. Really important to measure that. And then so what they learned was, it's not selling, right? So we need to do something else. They had this serendipitous invitation. They were flexible enough to respond to it. So they built a second time. We don't know how many times they did this, but that's another loop, right? Try it the next time and then measure how stoked the parents were. The kids loved it and it sold, and then they offered it again and they sold more. So the measurement, this is the essence of the strategic positioning is, great, you have a great idea. Let's do a build, measure, learn loop, or sometimes we call it lean methodology. The idea is to do small tests, test quickly to get feedback. You're looking for a response signal, and when you get a real signal, you'll know about it, right? Because you go from, oh boy, I wish people should buy it, and oh, how are we going to market it and convince people they need it, to, whoa, we have too many orders. Oh, the website's crashed because all the orders came in and we can't fulfill it. And we need a new distributor. And you switch into a whole different set of problems. And so that's the signal you're looking for. And trust me, you'll have no doubt when you hit that signal, because all of a sudden everybody wants what you have. It's self-evident. The value is self-evident. You don't have to convince people, right?
Yeah. And I mean, one other quick example is even for this MBA course, we've told the story before, but we didn't know if it was a known need that people would want to actually take an online MBA course. And so our build, measure, learn cycle was...
I remember arguing with you about it.
Yeah.
No, can't do that.
Yeah. And so our minimum viable product, which, there's some lean, it's important to note that like lean startup methodology is sort of used in many traditional corporations. And it's, we don't fully advocate for this like lean startup approach because it's associated with a lot of like tech and just corporate, but there is an element of simplicity and brilliance to it. And so for the Next Economy MBA, instead of building out an 18-session course and trying to create everything, our sort of minimum viable product was, let's create a web page that says we're launching this course and then see if anybody signs up or shows interest. And then after people signed up or showed interest, we spend the time to build it because we know that people are already interested rather than just hoping they're interested. And so,
yeah, basically we pre-sold it.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of the investing, pre-sold it. We got the signal. Everybody wants it. Great. Now we can go ahead and build it. Yeah, that's a great example.
Where do you want to go next, Shawn?
One, I think, important thing to mention about strategic positioning is another, maybe a synonym or a key aspect of it is how are you differentiated in the marketplace? And so hence this word position, implying that the position that your product or service is unique somehow. Because if not, then it means it's exactly like something else. And why would somebody choose you over something else? So it comes down to, exactly what's the nuance of what you're offering and how is that different? Yeah, Ryan, I'm just riffing with you here, but like, how would you know if something's different, or how do you, because we talked a little bit about market research. So how does the market and industry research, help you decide if you're different or not?
Yeah. And do you want me to speak at all about, segmenting, targeting, positioning here?
Sure.
Yeah.
That comes out of the research, right?
Yeah. So once you have a general idea of, what you might, like in the Seedles case, you're like, okay, so we have sort of this general idea that people don't want to buy them if it's for like just general agriculture use, but we have this market segment of people who are like parents who need birthday gifts, or sort of party favors, basically,
Yeah,
or Easter
novelty
presents.
value almost.
Yeah. So even though this idea of segmenting, targeting, positioning is still like, again, like a BA business as usual sort of idea, it can still be used to help companies achieve their long-term impact vision. So segmenting is sort of dividing this broad population into subgroups according to certain shared factors. So it could be things like age, gender, geographic location, attitudes, behaviors, etc. And people can belong to sort of multiple market segments. So you could be a woman from Generation X, which is the gender and age segment, living in an urban area, which is a geographic location, who likes to buy your food within walking distance, which is like a purchasing habit. And you buy that food from cooperatives or other socially responsible companies, which is an attitude. So targeting is sort of how you would like to then pick which market segments you would like to offer your goods or services to. And Shawn, you're described this Venn diagram of the basics of strategic positioning. Do you want to describe that just for folks?
Yeah, I will. And I'll also just pause to, you mentioned this, there's a lot of business as usual jargon here. And yes, this is exactly business as usual stuff. Of course, we're using these tactics guided by our next economy vision and values, right? So that's what's next economy about it. Not so much, what we're talking about here of, some of the elements are very, very old economy, but we're using them because they work. So the Venn diagram and these go together. So explain the visual for folks listening. Venn diagram is 3 circles that overlap in the center. And so one circle is your vision and culture. So again, we're just coming out of vision culture section. And then the other circle is your industry and the other circle is the market. So this idea, this sweet spot in the middle is where your vision and culture overlap with the market need or known need, and ideally a open space or a gap in the industry. So industry referring to your competition, and the market referring to the clientele, potential clientele. Yeah, so it's a visual that kind of helps you hold those 3 things in your mind, and then where is this special place that is in the middle?
You want to bring it home for folks who are listening, maybe with like case study of like, what's a company that's done that and how has it worked for them?
So one of our case stories here is a company called Whole Trees. So it's a building material and technology.
We do have an interview with Amelia Swan Baxter as well on Next Economy
nice.
Now. So
okay,
folks can listen to that too.
Yeah. And so it's a building material, but specifically they make what's called a truss. If folks know, a truss is a support. They can be like a triangular support that holds up the roof of a building, right? So it's a strong structural engineering component. And so these are typically conventionally made. So this would be what's happening in the industry. This typically would be made out of metal, or what's called dimensional lumber is where you take a tree, a whole tree, and you cut it into little sticks. So that's the industry reference on the Venn diagram. The vision and culture for Whole Trees is they're intending to offer a building material that makes better use of natural resources and provides a structurally sound building component. Okay, so that's their vision. So what their product is and how it is positioned in the market, they, instead of cutting the trees into sticks, which whenever you do that, it's not surprising when I say it, but it is unconventional for building. So again, conventional building, they take a beautiful whole tree, which is round and very strong and, can withstand the wind and grow for 100 years, etc. It is the strongest it's ever going to be as a whole tree. So instead of slicing it up into little sticks and then getting weaker, they're saying, let's use the whole tree as a pole as the structural element. Okay, so that's new. It's not new for humanity, but it's new for modern architecture. And so then they're making these truss structures out of whole trees to make those. So that's a new position in the industry. Nobody else is offering that. But they had to build, measure, learn. They had to really work on, well, where is our market segment? Who's going to buy this? Because you're not cutting it up. So you could say maybe there's less work. It doesn't fit in the normal industry norms. So it's going to be more expensive for them to produce. They're going to start on a smaller scale. It's a bigger piece of wood to move around than the little sticks. So it's a more expensive product. And so, okay, so We understand a little about the industry, their vision, but the market. Okay, so where in the market, what segment of the market wants a more expensive truss? And also, if you look at it, it's maybe more beautiful. There's a different appeal, especially if compared to the steel product or even the stick frame product. It has more character to it. You can see some knots, you can see some irregularities, some natural features. So when they're trying to pick their market segment, they could go for homeowners, building owners, engineers, contractors, architects, interior designers. If you're thinking about the segmentation of who is specifying materials for buildings. And so out of that, they chose architects, because architects are the ones that are they're looking at what's the aesthetic that I'm conveying with this design. So their product is a better fit for maybe a residential home than a warehouse, where you could buy a cheaper steel truss and it was going to hold your warehouse up fine. Or maybe an event center where it's a big open room and then you have this beautiful round pole truss. So that was basically the positioning that they chose, through their iteration. And, I think at least to a certain degree has been successful. And then they kind of furthered their product innovation because they couldn't just say, hey, architects, buy this. They had to actually evolve some design tools so that architects could render a whole pole structure, because that wasn't an option on their CAD menu. So they actually had to invest and create technology for architects to use it, but that was successful for them to open up that market.
And one other thing that I learned about them is that they've even gone more targeted within architects. So another segment of architects to just look at event canopies and pavilions, solar carports, playscapes, and zoos. So that's like a super targeted. It's like you start off with building construction, you narrow it down to architects, and then within architects, it's architects who build zoos or playscapes, and they found a lot of success with those.
But it makes sense for those structures. Those are the ones that really feature that material and that product. It's basically the only thing in that structure is the whole tree and then a roof over it. Rather, if it's a house or something, you can't see from the outside that you have a whole poles in it. So it makes a lot of sense, but it wasn't necessarily, they didn't come with that the first day, right? It sounds like they had to get that over time, which again speaks to, and I mentioned the loop, but one of the pitfalls is not completing the loops, right? And unfortunately, we see too many companies, they don't even complete the first loop. It's just like, well, this is the way I wanted to do it, and this is what the world needs, and then they don't evolve, which, either you hit it out of the gate or not, but what's the chance you get something really complex right on the first time? So the idea is we want to have iterative design on all of our systems. Are we updating them as we go? Are we adapting, into the future? Is there what else should we say about positioning? Is there other pitfalls to look out for? Other tactics to use?
Yeah, it may be worth saying this idea of differentiation and collaboration, just in the sense that it's sort of strategic positioning, business as usual terminology. It's usually framed as how do we beat the competition and put competitors out of business, and really just like war, sort of like, yeah. And so how do you, if you're a next economy company, how do you enter a marketplace when there's other next economy companies? That's an interesting challenge. And so what we've tried to do is look at, are there ways to complement each other rather than competing? So differentiation might be, identifying, communicating the unique qualities of your product or service or company while highlighting distinct differences between your offerings and other folks in the marketplace. So you to differentiate your product, you really want to make sure you have a strong value proposition that goes hand in hand with the product or service. And so, I think that's what we're going to get into soon, is talking about core value propositions. But I just wanted to note that, if you're a next economy company, there's often unseen benefits to, values aligned partnerships with other next economy businesses. It's probably worth mentioning the B Corp, some of the B Corp consulting I do. One of my quote unquote competitors also does B Corp consulting. And instead of submitting competing bids to a client that we were both working to get, I reached out to her and just said, hey, what if we collaborated on the same client? We could learn from each other how we do it. And I realized through that, it's actually changed some of Lyft's entire business model, that we were way undercharging. She's like, you only charge that much? She's like, I charge like 5 times as much as you. I was like, what? And so actually changing some of our business model, or, collaborating with another quote unquote competitor actually helped both of us, because she got to see how my process was and I got to see her process and obviously pricing. And so just is another plug for this idea of collaboration between next economy companies can actually be mutually beneficial. It doesn't have to be, this dog eat dog type of world.
Yeah, I love that, Ryan. And also I can build on that by foreshadowing some of our sales methodology, right? Where our sales, next economy sales approach isn't close everything, whether they need it or not, right? It's actually look for alignment. So if you're really clear in your position and you're really listening and curious about a client, you can actually understand if, hey, this is actually a really good fit for us, or actually I know my industry really well and I'm actually friendly with them and you're a great fit for this other company's offer. And I'm going to send you on over there. And so now I'm creating goodwill and mutual benefit, in my industry by saying, hey, we're not the best fit for you. You want to talk to them. And then vice versa, because we do this slightly different position here. And then, you can set up a strategic partnership with that referral partner and say, hey, we do this. I know you do that. That's why I sent you there. If you have folks, that are doing that, send them over here. And then you get this win-win where you both are selling in your sweet spot rather than trying to catch everything that's out there. So good point on, positioning can work for collaboration as well.
Yeah. Were there other pieces you want to mention on this?
I think one thing that's important to mention about positioning, we talked about needs and no needs. It's kind of a different way to say it. There's a subtle difference in the point, but is that perception is reality, right? So as much as and a lot of times maybe you're going to know a lot more about your industry and marketplace than a given consumer. And so, yeah, you may be very well educated on all the materials and the whole life cycle and all this stuff. And so from that really knowledgeable perspective, you might know the best product, et cetera. But when a prospective customer sees your product, your service, your brand, boom, you're immediately positioned by their perception. Doesn't matter that they don't understand the whole thing. So their perception is the reality of how you're positioned to them. And even if you don't even think about strategic positioning for your company, you're positioned by default as when somebody sees you, they have a perception, and then that's real. It might not be everybody's perception, but if enough people see you and enough people have a certain reaction, that's how you're positioned in that, market segment, at least. So it informs us to really be curious and to really test. Because again, we might think and know all this stuff, and then you put it out there and nobody's buying it, right? So, okay, tweak it this way, change the color, change the size, change the market segment, keep changing it until you start to get that, signal that people are actually interested. But yeah, just this idea of like really respecting, what people are perceiving.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Maybe we should shift to core value proposition, keep it moving in this positioning.
Right. Yeah. So there's a flow here, right? So you're starting with the research, understanding what's out there, choosing a position, testing it. You're getting a signal, right? So there's a viable business model here, maybe. Okay. So now what? So messaging and branding. So, and this is, again, with the pitfalls of like somewhat of a linear order because, and I don't know if you've heard this, Ryan, with when somebody has a new idea for a company and boom, they tell you right away what it's called, but they haven't done their research. They haven't done their core values. They don't have their team yet. Boom, they're already to the branding, which is all the way down in the stack.
It's more fun.
Totally fun. And I'm down with nonlinear and that's great. And, go with the inspiration when it comes to you. But there is an order that makes sense to really invest. So the problem would be is if you go with that name and you commission the logo and the website and you have all the things printed and produced, and then that branding, that messaging doesn't resonate with your clients. So how should we do it?
Yeah. And so with this core value proposition, you're really trying to sort of articulate your distinction. So the idea of strategic positioning broadly is to make your company and its offerings distinct. And then the goal of a core value proposition is to articulate that distinction clearly. So your core value proposition, it can be complemented by different messages that describe the benefits of the offering. and they can be crafted for different audiences. So in the business as usual, they call like your core differentiators. So you can, marry what is true about you, your sense of yourself, your gifts, what you bring to the world, and then, what's alive in you, your values, and convey that with language that people in your target market identify with. So that's, again, like, we keep referencing back to this idea of needs versus known needs. So Native American natural foods and the Tonka bar is a good example of this. Native American natural foods is, indigenous owned company based on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, which is home to the Oglala Lakota people. And, they, in 2007, they sort of created this category of the meat bar, which is the Tonka bar. This is based on a centuries old Lakota recipe of dried buffalo meat and fruit. And so they weren't just, coming to the market with, hey, there's a new meat bar, buffalo. It's like they had so many different pieces to their messaging that really resonated with folks. So it's like, hey, we're indigenous owned, indigenous made product. The buffalo, why is the buffalo different than like a cow? So talking about like how it, buffalo is actually better for grassland regeneration, and, also talking about the slaughter, of buffalo and how they were essentially removed from the Great Plains and are now, through this Native American natural foods Tonka bar, helping restore this goal of restoring 1 million buffalo to their native lands, and also sort of restoring the economic foundation of health and prosperity to 40,000 Native American folks living on Pine Ridge. And so this strategic positioning of Native American natural foods is, it sort of has multiple messages, and its authenticity is like incomparable. There's no other meat bar that can really even hold a light to them in terms of their positioning and core value. And so that's like a great example of, how do we take what's true about us, our own values, and then also communicate it to the audience and in ways that they resonate with and understand. I'm not sure if you want to say anything there, Shawn, or...
Thanks for that example. That is a good one because they do have a very distinct value proposition. I think the key here, and you said it, is what resonates with that target market. So instead of, again, me as the owner, founder, and this is how I want to say about it, it's who's that target market. So there's this it's kind of like a deep empathy, a curiosity of like, what's meaningful to them? What's the language that they would use? And so that's the messaging. But then in the branding would even be like, what are the colors? What are the images, right? So instead of it being me, I'm the genius, entrepreneur or something, it's no, I'm actually really curious of what works for them. And then maybe even testing, right? Do a bunch of messages and branding and then put them out
Build,
there.
measure, learn.
Yeah, and get a lot of feedback as being really important. And I think, wasn't that part of the Tonka story of they use their own community, right, to work on this message and branding and storytelling. So, so kind of like doing away with this idea of like any one person being so brilliant, and then actually just bring it to the community, bring it to the market, test it, try it. And again, like when it works, you'll know. Right? And so there's like this a little bit of discipline to like stay in testing until it really catches on.
One thing to say on this, like pitfalls or like the evolution of your core value proposition. So one pitfall we've seen is once your core value proposition is identified, it's fixed for all time. Like we will always, and so we really see organizations that are thoughtful about this to be adaptive and flexible to change their core value position as the market changes. So for example, Native American natural foods Tonka bar was the first meat bar, but then a bunch of other copycat meat bars came into the market. And so they had to figure out, okay, so how do we position ourselves against these other meat bars, which do not have the same authenticity and story? And, they've had some success doing that. And it's also difficult, in this particular case when, competitors are owned by multi-billion-dollar multinationals, which just have a lot of money to throw at something. So, part of the marketing and positioning for next economy companies is really critical, because if you're going up against well-funded multinational corporations and you have not thoughtful or generic positioning, you're definitely not going to succeed. So it's sort of being flexible and adaptable and really trying to hit on that core value proposition is really critical. The last thing I'll say too on this is an example that actually was in our MBA course is one student asked us, a great question, like if my customers want environmentally sustainable products, but not something else that I care about, like racial justice, should I switch my targeting to a smaller market that cares about both, or should I try to educate my current market? And so in our experience, the first step would be really to ensure that you're doing diligent market research and having conversations with clients and customers and prospective customers to identify their known needs. And so if you find a market niche that says, you find a group of people that want both products that have a racial justice and environmental component, then you can position to serve that market. And on the other hand, if you can't find that evidence, you could still provide the financially or the sort of environmentally friendly products, but then educate your customers about racial justice in order to build a market that's interested in both. So part of the opportunity for those of us in this next economy entrepreneurs in this space is you might connect with a part of your customers might connect with a part of your vision or your value system. And then you can use that education-based selling component to help bring folks up to speed and educate them as to, why they might be interested in this. And some entrepreneurs have even a creative twist is like you offer educational services that folks are willing to pay for, and you can sort of grow your market while actually getting revenue from educating folks about these different topics. So
right. So you would actually adapt to the market by pivoting from being just a product company to also offering services, which is part of your point of, and kind of we were saying before, of these loops. It's not just one time. It's the market changes. There's new technology, There was pre-internet, then there's internet. There was pre-social media, then there's social media. Now there was pre-AI. Now I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Things change. So you can't just offer the same thing. Like what if, do you still advertise in the yellow pages? No. They don't print those anymore. Thank God. You have to adapt and meet the market at, but not necessarily leave it there, right? So that's where this kind of both and is. You need to find some traction, but if your vision is beyond, your initial product or service that you're getting traction with, then you can launch some of these parallel efforts, right? And, build on that success and then use that to invest in, furthering your vision in these different ways.
Well, I think we touched on most of the key parts in this section, just to recap for folks, this idea of industry research first, needs versus known needs, making sure you're trying to do education-based selling for folks if you see it as a need and they don't, try and educate folks into turning it into a known need. The importance of build, measure, learn cycles, the segmenting, targeting, positioning, and how it sort of connects with your vision and values, industry opportunities, and your market needs, how to collaborate with other folks in your space, and then, what is the core value proposition that connects folks and how do you evolve it over time? And so I think that covers the main pieces. Shawn, anything else we should add in this section?
Well, of course, in our full webinar training, we go a lot deeper into all this, but I think that's great, intro for the podcast here. And if folks are interested, please come and find us and learn more.
Yeah, just to forecast for folks, we'll be talking about fundraising and strategy as well, and then like partnerships. So there's some more pieces to come in these podcast series in the strategy section. And then, we hope folks continue to learn more and reach out if you have any questions.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.